Hello, and welcome to today's webinar from Telrock. My name is Mark Buckley, and I'll be your host today. This webinar is titled Addressing 5 Big Problems That Delay Debt Collection Software Delivery. I'll now hand you across to today's presenters, Andrew Pritchard and Steve Crowell. Gentlemen, over to you.
Thank you, Mark. Steve and I really appreciate the opportunity to be here today. It's a privilege to present this webinar. Huge welcome to everyone that's both joining us today, or if you're catching this at some point in the future on catch up. I'd like to start today with a small piece of advice that I was given many years ago, towards the start of my career, from a very experienced project manager who said to me, Andy, you know, projects that overrun by a year or more, do you know how that happens every single time? And I was sort of scratching my head for a little while, trying to think what this one thread was that connected all of these projects that overran, and couldn't really come up with anything. And she said, projects overrun by a year or more by one day at a time. And at the time, that didn't really land with me that much, but it stuck with me over the years. And I think as the years have gone on, it's something that I've recognized is absolutely the case, almost more often than not. For everyone watching this today, I'm sure you've either been involved with a project or you've worked alongside colleagues who have been on a project, or you've heard of a project that's just overrun. And particularly in the debt collection software space, where we hear about projects that are due to last sub 2 years, that end up lasting 3, 4, or even more years, and sometimes even just get canned partway through because they just don't make it live. And that absolutely shouldn't be the case. So today, Steve and I are going to run through 5 pitfalls that we've recognized that can cause some of these delays, how to spot them, how to navigate around them, and just a few tips and tricks. My name's Andrew Pritchard. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer at Telrock. Telrock is a global technology provider of modern SaaS cloud-native consumer debt collection solutions. Our flagship product, which we call Optimus, is an enterprise-wide collections and recovery software platform. It's been built from the ground up over the last 10 years, and our solutions use modern technology, powerful cloud computing. We're PCI DSS and SOC 2 compliant, and are built on intelligent designs. And this has resulted in the broadest and richest software as a service offering in the market. And the quality of the platform was a huge driver for me when I joined Telrock in 2024. Prior to that, I've been in the industry for nearly 25 years, working both client-side project delivery, collections advisory, having built a consultancy company that's dedicated to collections and recoveries. And I'm delighted to be joined today by my colleague, Steve, in our US office. Steve, over to you to introduce yourself.
Thanks, Andy. Good day, everybody. I'm Steve Crowell. I lead the delivery and support groups here at Telrock. Been with Telrock a little over 3 years. Prior to that, I spent just a smidge over 30 years at a previous organization that also had a collection system. So my whole career has been in and around, collection software and implementing it with our clients. So a bit seasoned from it when it comes to that perspective, and have done everything from software delivery to development back in the day to leading groups. So historic background and pretty broad.
Thanks, Steve. So I guess in summary, between us, a few years experience and a few projects under our belt as well.
Yep.
Before we get stuck into the main detail today, I'd like to start with, at the risk of stating the obvious, Steve, but we've picked out these 5 areas. We are by no means saying that this is an exhaustive list, right?
Oh no, I think to your point, and it's a great anecdote, it happens one day at a time, which means there will be a lot of issues, right? But these are the ones that are the big levers, the ones that if you are careful with these and give careful thought to and preparation in starting the project, you'll be in better shape. So I think these are the ones we've seen these movies several times.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's on that note, let's kick it off then. Let's start with our first item, which is proper discovery. So getting ready for a project. There's almost always a really key driver, almost about ending a project before it started, right? Setting, really aggressive timelines. And sometimes that can drive the behavior to just get going with the main project as quickly as possible. And an area that gets overlooked is proper discovery, readying yourself for the project proper. Steve, kind of really interested in your experience around what people watching today should really consider when going through this kind of discovery phase.
I think, as we view it here at Telrock, and I have in my past, this discovery phase in the early part of this project is the key linchpin to a successful launch in the project. Everything from planning properly, but I think one of the key areas that we continue to run into is making sure that we're working with our clients in preparing and documenting well what they need to get done, business processes, those type of things. So that way, when you get into the project, you're in a much better shape.
Absolutely, and I think I couldn't agree more. And I think as well, probably a theme that we'll touch on throughout some of the other 4 points today is finding that sweet spot as well, right? Because there's always a little bit more documentation that can be done. There's maybe always a little bit more scope that can be refined, but finding that sweet spot is really important, right?
Absolutely. If you spend too much time getting bound on it and documenting to the nth degree, you can spend too much time doing that, right? But I've been on and led a lot of projects where there was zero, and so where that impacts you later is when you're getting into some detailed designs and you're working with your client to draw those out. They're trying to remember those, and inherently you're going to miss things. So yeah, there's a delicate balance to the extent to which you want to document. Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, working with the right professionals to understand when is it good enough, when is it the right time to then get going, and there is a balance between none and perhaps kind of too much. Leads us on to our second point. Actually, it ties in very nicely because and it's kind of split this next point into 2 parts really, and that is ensuring you've got a realistic effort balance across client and vendor partner side. And I say it comes in 2 parts. I think there should be an initial view prior to full discovery. And then obviously that can get iterated and refined throughout that discovery phase. But what we're talking about here is unrealistic expectations early on as to what's needed. I know certainly in my time in the industry, I have seen some vendors to get a sale will kind of reduce down the effort that's required both on the vendor side, generally bringing costs down, and on the client side, which generally brings in timelines. We've seen, I've seen instances where vendors will suggest perhaps quite a long period of time for system testing that's their responsibility, in a very short window for user acceptance testing, which is a client responsibility. And of course, those timelines get blown out of the water, and then that can be refined through discovery. Steve, kind of, in your years of experience, interested to hear your thoughts in this area.
I think similarly, I've seen the same thing where there's a variety of how vendor partners out there will propose implementing a project, and so sitting down and working with your vendor partner on your selected solution, and working through what the right mix is in the project is going to be key, right? Making sure that you're starting that off right. Again, to your point, you can adjust that later, right? But starting off with, it's not going to be, hey, I'll train you for 3 weeks and then you go off by yourself and do it. That's not going to work, right? But on the other hand, it's not going to be, you don't want your vendor partner doing it all either. So, and I think the other big area for me has been, you're going to work with your clients, or you as a client are going to work with a solution, and you're going to maintain it, and you're going to manage it, right? And so it's important as throughout that project you're engaged, and as such, you want to make sure with your vendor partner, when you're working through the project, you've got a good mix of folks doing that. The reality is those folks have full-time jobs. You don't have people laying around ready to do something and that's all they do. So one of the biggest challenges has been getting enough bandwidth from our clients to make sure that they're engaged, building the knowledge and working with the solution.
Yeah, no, 100% agree. Absolutely. Perhaps just changing tack slightly as we move on to our third point. And Steve, I know this is an area that you've got sort of strong views on, and that is to, not replicate or try and recreate what you had previously. And this is particularly true when it's a significant migration, upgrade, conversion, or perhaps a completely new implementation. If you're moving from a legacy software stack, whether that's an inherent one, an in-house inbuilt system, or commercially available, but you're moving from legacy to modern, not to just automatically go to recreate what you have today. And Steve, I know you've got some strong opinions on that, so interested to hear those.
Yeah, one of the challenges, and this goes back to our documentation, right? One of the things that you're going to want to have in place is your business processes documented. And in a lot of cases, this is the first solution, or you're putting in a new one 20, 30 years later from your last one, right? And business processes tend to get built around, in some cases, in a lot of cases, the capabilities of your solution and your architectural stack as it stands now, right? And you're heading to that new one. So, I would encourage those of you out there to look at those business processes and figure out how much of those are wrapped around current capabilities versus that's really how you want the process to flow, right? And try to hone in on those that are maybe more built around that, and peel those back a bit. So that way you're really looking at the pure, what is the business process flow for that? So that way you're not trying to, again, recreate the old system in the new, and taking advantage of that new system's capabilities. It's going to do things a little bit differently. It's inherently, it is. There isn't a collection system out there that does everything the same, right? They'll approach things a little bit differently. So take advantage of not only their technology stack, something modern, but what their strength and capabilities are.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we absolutely recognize that, you mentioned there 10, 20, maybe 30 years. This is not an annual event for clients. This is a once in a decade or 20 plus years. And the reality is, if you are moving from a legacy solution, you've now got to start considering, real-time data in and out, digital first, digital orchestration of communications. You've got the option for, consumer portals and interacting with your customers 24/7, 365, and taking all of that into consideration. And so again, we come back to this sweet spot a little bit, probably completely reinventing everything you do may just end up being a bit too much, but certainly not trying to err towards what you've got today. The chances are there'll be a lot of legacy processes, as you say, that are constrained by what you're using today. And actually, just on that, kind of moves to our fourth point, which is an area I know personally I've seen many times that has derailed and elongated projects, and that's integration. Integration of other applications, other systems. We are very cognizant of the fact that a collection system doesn't just speak to the host system or billing system. There may be 20 or 30 touch points that we're going into and out of, and technology and collections platforms that don't enable that to be built out by the project team, by the technical and business analysts, can end up pulling on IT resources that we know are really thin across an organization. The IT resources generally are kind of the most in-demand team in an organization. And so moving too much into the IT and technical integration folk can end up just delaying a project. And when you've got 20 or 30 touch points, that just extrapolates the issue. Steve, any experience you've got in that space or thoughts you'd like to give?
Yeah, I think when you're out looking for a solution, for a new solution, I think it's going to be key to look for something that can handle all the different permutations of what you're going to possibly need, right? Most solutions out there, some of the more modern ones have the no-code, low-code capabilities, so you're not hard-coding integrations, and that is extremely important, right? So that way, when you're needing to do integration work, you're not having to redeploy the solution. It's really configuration based. But just as important, probably more importantly, is making sure that it's got the right capability mix of being able to handle all the different possible ways to integrate, whether that's API based, whether it's file based, does it have a mixture, and how it can do all that stuff. So at the end of the day, not everybody's at that new state and can handle just APIs, for example, right? I've worked with just recently a couple of clients where they had vendor services where they were still file based, so we had to handle that as well. So make sure that solution or look for the solution that has those capabilities across the different myriad of options.
Yeah, absolutely. And when we talk about the business and technical analysts as well, being able to integrate with configuration rather than kind of coding, we are also talking about using the kind of discipline and rigor that an IT team would usually go through, right? We're not talking about analysts that are just able to go into production and make changes on the fly. You know, it's still a very process-driven piece of activity, done in a really disciplined way, lots of rigor, but it's the ability of the core team that you've got on the project able to do that. So not having that reliance on external third parties, and even your partner's third party IT teams as well, right? So you've then got a reliance that's outside of your organization. And again, time and time again, we've seen integration just run on and can be a complete blocker.
Yeah, absolutely. Those other your third party vendors outside of this partner vendor you're working with, can have a dramatic impact on your timelines. I've seen that numerous times where that stretches things out. So, upfront, early in the project, get them engaged and start to understand what that timeline and what their process looks like.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, moving on to our fifth point, our final point already, which kind of ties a lot of these together. And I know it's one that we work with clients at Telrock a lot, and over my career I have as well from an advisory perspective, and that's really try to consider and understand project phasing, right? So there's obviously been a huge trend and move towards MVP or kind of day one delivery over the last few years. Minimum viable product doesn't always necessarily mean the minimum amount that you need to go live. It should really be the most kind of sensible, viable product, but not giving consideration to a day 2 and day 3 and trying to put too much into that initial go live can cause all sorts of problems. The more scope that's in there, the more risk there is to go wrong, right? And so really consider phasing the project both for a kind of day 1 delivery, day 2 and day 3 as well. Steve, perhaps you want to give us some views on how we work with our clients and what our recommendation is from a project phasing perspective.
Absolutely. And heard this message earlier today, right? It's that delicate balance, working with the client to understand what's important out of the gate from a day 1 standpoint if they wanted to do a multi-phased project. And happy to do the larger one, right? And each one comes with its own risks and downfalls. So it's trying to figure out what's the right mix for your client's business needs or your business needs as a client, what you need to get done in time, understanding there's going to be foundational pieces that do need to be built out as part of your day 1, trying to have a line of sight and open line of sight towards what day 2, day 3 will look like, because you won't have 100% of your capabilities and capacities to work on those things. You'll be distracted. So all those things come into play in terms of what is the right mix.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you mentioned a good point there as well around the drivers for these projects. They all have different drivers. It may be a technical currency driver and an IT driven program. It may well be a business led program in terms of new functionality supporting your end customers, ensuring that customer experience is as good as it can be. And that should also bring into perspective what makes sense from day 1. And picking up on a point you made earlier, especially now with SaaS-based products, and certainly from the Telrock side, we desperately want our clients to be self-sufficient, in the main, being able to make changes, continually improve with minimal support back from their vendor partner, but there if they need it. And those day 2, day 3 phases enable an organization to really get up to speed with the product, really understand it for day 1, and then reduce that reliance down, rather than trying to put everything into this phase 1 delivery. Steve, I mean, your sort of thoughts on that with certainly with some of the clients that we've got at the moment.
It's a great concept, and I think it's one that everybody should consider, right? Day 1's going to be important to get the foundational piece out the door and build your knowledge, because you'll have to manage and maintain that solution, right? And to your point, you'll then have the capability for day 2 and day 3 activities to be able to to work on those much more in your own silo. Although again, the caveat to that is you'll be distracted with maintaining the day-to-days and everything else. So there'll be some that may extend and stretch out those timelines.
Yeah.
But one of the things my mentor for numerous years said to me when I was working with her years ago was, don't be afraid to make those decisions out of the gate, and you may not make the right one, and odds are you're not, but be ready to adjust as you go. And I think, as we've seen clients with these phased approaches, they can flow a little bit in terms of what comes in and out of a stage.
Absolutely. I mean, also we said at the top of this session that some projects run on for 3+ 4 years. We've got to think about the outside environment as well. I mean, there's barely been 3 or 4 months in the last few years where something significant hasn't happened that can have some sort of impact on our project anyway. So by reducing down that phase 1 delivery, we can at least get that one going, get that one live, and then we can adjust as we go. What we had planned for day 2 may not make it to day 3 or day 4, and we can move things around, but at least we've got that platform in place.
Yep.
So look, those are the 5 areas that we picked up today. So just to recap, proper discovery, making sure that you're really ready for the project properly, by documenting, by understanding your processes, understanding who's going to make the decisions, getting your governance set up, is really important to kick the project off on the right foot, and much more likely to make that land on time, on budget. Secondly, making sure that right out of the gate there's a realistic balance effort across your vendor and the client side as well, and that will refine a little bit and can also be tweaked and adjusted as you go through, but just making sure that seems reasonable and that seems valid from the start. Not trying to just recreate what you've got today, in particular if it's perhaps a technical currency driven program, where you're not really looking to implement a whole raft of new business processes and changes, but still making sure that you're making use of your new solution, taking advantage of modern technology, making sure that your vendor provides integration techniques that are low code, no code, that your project team are able to configure, and that you don't have a heavy reliance on IT. And then finally, just phasing the overall program, chunking it up into reasonable sized project deliveries rather than trying to put everything in there in one go. And so those are the 5 big ones that Steve and I wanted to address and discuss today. I mean, Stephen, we always like to delight our customers. If we were to pick one more thing as a piece of bonus content, is there one other area that didn't quite make the 5 that you think actually as a parting shot you would like to just mention also?
Yeah, and you touched on it a little bit. You mentioned the word governance a little bit ago, and everybody's aware of governance throughout a project, and it's one of my my important areas that I like to focus on in leading projects with our clients, is making sure we've got a good, strong, not only governance program, but an oversight governance model with your executives and stakeholders. So I like to make sure that we're lined up with those folks. These are the folks that are there to help make decisions, help clear roadblocks and hurdles, make sure they're up to date on where they're at with the project, and help keep that team focused on the goals you've set. But just as importantly, and I mentioned this earlier, and you did also, Andy, is that's also where you can make some adjustments and shifts, right? Making sure that you're stepping back as part of that, looking at where you're at, looking at your trajectory, and making sure if you need to make those adjustments that you've got the right folks there to do that. Again, it's going to happen. You're going to make adjustments, but the better that you can be prepared for that, the more frequently you're meeting as an executive or stakeholder team, the better off you'll be when you're working through that.
Yeah, 100% agree, and I think that's a fantastic way to end the content today. So thank you, Steve. Also, thank you to Mark and everyone at the CSA for the opportunity today to host this webinar. Steve and I would love to continue the conversation with you. You can find us on LinkedIn or through telrock.com, whether you're looking for a new technology provider or not. We're always interested in subject matter, and so please do feel free to reach out and contact us. Back to you, Mark.
Thank you very much, Andrew. That was certainly an interesting and informative discussion between the two of you there. If anyone does have any questions, you can send them through now in the comments section. We'll give people a few seconds or so just to see if anything comes through. But as Andrew said, if you want time to digest what's been said today, there are various ways in which you can contact either Andrew or Steve following on from today's webinar. Doesn't look as though anything's coming through right now, so it's obviously people are taking that in with what you've said today. So what I'd like to do is thank Andrew and Steve very much for their time today. I'd like to remind everyone that this webinar will be listed on our website from tomorrow if you'd like to listen again, or even recommend it to any colleagues who may not have been able to make it today. Also, before you go, we'd appreciate if you could just give a little bit of feedback in the relevant areas provided. In the meantime, thank you everyone for your time today, and goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.